But guess what? Yeah. Okay. As you can see, Alan Hornbuckle is not here today. He, did you say he's never here? Is that what you? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, he had to go help Ransom get hitched yesterday, so he he's at the he went to a wedding and it was late last night, so I think they're going to stay over until this afternoon. And Blaine will be preaching this morning, so well, that looks forward to. Huh? That's what I said, didn't Ransom's wedding, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ransom got married yesterday. Yeah, talk with Ransom. Yeah. Anyway, he's been having quite a few studies from the Old Testament, which is, I think, real good because sometimes we kind of think, well, I really don't have to study the Old Testament because, we live under the new law, we live under the Christian dispensation, so we don't really have to study the Old Testament. But to me, that's kind of like taking a history book and opening it up in the middle and starting like with a civil war. It's like, how do we get here? And that's really the way it is. I mean, the only way to really understand what the Gospels are talking about is, when they're talking about different things, some of the things they believe and some of the things that the Jews are teaching at the time. The only way to really understand what they're talking about is by studying the Old Testament. And I think he's been doing a good job. And he's had, I know he's spent the last couple of weeks at least, maybe a little more on talking about Joseph. And that's a good subject. Joseph is good, but I like talking about Bible characters. I mean, the characters of the Old Testament. I mean, they're really, it's good to read. I mean, talking about the things that they did and the things that God did through them is really fascinating to me. So this morning, I don't know what he's got in mind from, he may have said, but I don't remember what he's got in mind now, but when he comes back. But what we're going to do this morning, we're going to look at Daniel. And the main part of the lesson this morning is going to come from Daniel chapter 6. And it's a familiar story, Daniel in the lion's den. I mean, every child that's been to Sunday school pretty much can tell you about Daniel in the lion's den, or Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and those stories like that. But we're going to look at it a little bit this morning and trying to get some ideas and get some lessons from that. We're talking about the book of Daniel. Daniel is really a narrative history. It's telling about the history. It's written about 530 BC, and it records the events of the Babylonian captivity from about 560 to 530 BC. And Daniel at that time, of course, was a servant. Daniel was there when Nebuchadnezzar took Israel into captivity. And the purpose really of the book of Daniel, it's really a historical account of how God protects and provides for his faithful followers, and especially while they were in captivity. They needed God more than any other time in their life. So it really talks about how he protects them. And Daniel in chapters 1 through 6 talking about his own life in captivity, and that he was selected because of his influence and the way he was. He was selected to work with the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. They had to make some tough decisions back then, whether the Israelites, if they're going to, really continue to follow God or if they're going to follow the king. The story that to me is really more interesting, we're going to look at chapter 6 mostly today. We'll go back through some other things, but chapter 6 is the one book or the chapter in the book of Daniel that I really want to talk about. And there's a lot of different fascinating characters in Daniel. Daniel represents the loyal commitment that to God and the purposes of God, and it provides an example to all of us that want to serve God. This was a difficult period of time, and he had a unique role before all these pagan rulers and all the oppressed people of God. He dealt with ancient rulers like Nebuchadnezzar and Cyrus and Darius. His brilliant teaching, though, and his godly life, they even caused the rulers to praise God and to realize that there was a God, that they wanted to praise the God of Israel. And my favorite story, I guess, of all the Bible is the book of Daniel, chapter 6. And again, that's a real familiar story to all of us. It's how he got into the lion's den. It begins with chapter 6. Really begins where chapter 5 leaves off. Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, has been killed, and Darius the Mede takes control of the Babylonian Empire. Now it's the empire of the Medes and the Persians, and Cyrus, the Persian, will eventually take control of the kingdom. It's Cyrus who will then return the Jews from captivity to their native country. But the story here picks up under Darius' rule. Beginning with verse 1 of chapter 6, it said, "Please Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss." After he took over, he appointed 120 governors over the kingdom, and over these governors he appointed 3, what we would call, I guess, presidents over those. He made Daniel the first president because of this great influence and the excellent spirit he had with him, according to verse 3. Now, the other governors weren't too satisfied with that. They didn't like it. We know how that is. Anybody's ever worked anywhere, they pretty much know how that is. Somebody gets a position that, a higher position in the organization, and, there's always going to be somebody come along and say, "I don't know how you got that job. I mean, I should have had that job." And that's kind of the way it was then. I mean, when they saw Daniel get that position, then, they didn't like it. They were dissatisfied with that arrangement. Now, we're not really given the motives in chapter 6 of what or the details of what their motives were, but we just know that they didn't like it, and they sought to get rid of Daniel. They sought to get him out of there somehow to get him out of that position. They were looking for an occasion, looking for a time that they could use against him, but they really couldn't find one. They couldn't find a time, and it's kind of like, again, it's kind of like in everyday life. Sometimes people are just looking for something, looking for something to catch you at, or something to use against you. But then they came up with a plan. They came up with this law that says that whoever petitions anyone, man or God, for 30 days, except the king, shall be cast into the lion's den. And that was the thing they came up with. Well, Darius didn't know what they were up to, so he says, "Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Everybody's got to bow down to me. Everybody's got to worship me." So he signs the law, not really knowing what he's doing, and didn't know what their motives were. But what does Daniel do? Daniel hears about the law. He sees what's going on. But what does he do? I mean, he doesn't cower. He doesn't say, "Oh well, I'm not going to worry about that too much." And he goes ahead and does what he's been doing. He goes ahead and prays. He knew that he passed the law, but he went home and went to his windows and he prayed to God as he did every day. He continued to do that. He refused to compromise. That's the way we as Christians should be today. Whatever we do in our life, we should refuse whatever's going on around us. We need to remember that we can't compromise our Christianity, compromise our beliefs for the things that's going on today. Some things cannot be compromised, and one thing that cannot be compromised is what Daniel was doing, and that is prayer. Prayer is something that's commanded of us. 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, "Pray without ceasing." Prayer is the unused tool of many Christians. We get up in the morning and say, well, there's people that have certain times that they like to spend time with in meditation and reading and praying. Some people like to do it in the morning. Some people like to do it at night. Some people like to, in the afternoon when things are quieting down a little bit, they might do it in the afternoon. It doesn't matter when you do it, but you need to do it. But I'm afraid a lot of times we go through life and we know what we need to do. We know we need to pray. That's our way of communicating with God. He communicates to us through His Word, and we communicate to God through prayer. And that's our way of talking to God. But sometimes we just do other things. We think about other things, and we don't think about spending time with God. But God wants His people to pray. He says in Psalms 55 and verse 17, "Evening and in morning and at noon I will pray and cry aloud, and He shall hear my voice." That's Psalms 55:17. God wants us to pray. David here saying, "Evening and morning and at noon I will pray." I've heard people say, when the Bible says pray without ceasing, say, well, how do you go around all the time praying? I mean, you can't just go around, and the thing is not so much, going around, actually saying a prayer, but having a prayerful heart as we live each day. As you're going about your daily business, as you're going, driving down the road, as you're doing your work, as you're doing things around the house, whatever you're doing, any activity, you can still have a prayerful attitude and, just continually thank God for the blessings that we have. Thank God for all the things that He does for us. Thank Him for the families that we have, and thank Him for the church, and pray for all the people that need to be prayed for. So the plan was set in motion. They had tricked Darius into signing this law that says anybody that worships anybody but the king will be put in the lion's den. And they saw that Daniel didn't give in. He was still doing what he normally did. It was his custom to pray, and that's what he continued to do. Well, guess what they did? They went to the king. Guess what? We caught Daniel. He's over there praying. He ain't supposed to. He's not doing what you ordered him to do. He's still praying. So they sought to deliver Daniel to the king. That's when the king kind of realized, hey, something's going on here. He kind of realized that, I think they tricked me. He was displeased with himself. He didn't. He kind of realized then, I believe, that what he had done. But he, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, he couldn't reverse it. He had already made the law. And once he made that law, it couldn't be reversed. So he had to continue. So Daniel was condemned. He was put in the lion's den. But the king professed his confidence that Daniel's God would deliver him. Now that's an interesting thought to me. This is a king who really is more concerned with himself than anything else. I mean, he was really happy when they came to him and said, hey, we're going to make a law that everybody has to worship you, but not, the God of Israel or any other God, but they have to worship you. And he was kind of pleased with that. It kind of puffed him up a little bit. He was pleased with it. But now he kind of realizes when they condemn Daniel, when they come to him and say, hey, Daniel's not doing what you commanded. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's not supposed to be praying, but yet he's going praying. I think the king finally realized what was going on. So he expressed confidence that Daniel's God would deliver him, that is the God of Israel. Daniel was put in the lion's den, and a stone was brought to seal over the lion's den with the king's seal. As we think about that, we think about in our own lives as we live each day, that always wicked people are trying to catch the righteous people that's trying to live a Christian life, trying to live right. They're always trying to catch them in some kind of violation. They're trying to catch them, catch them in doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and where they, for whatever reason, it might just be to, so they can go and talk about it. Tell somebody, hey, I caught so and so doing something. I caught them doing something they wasn't supposed to be doing, and they like to talk about it. But the wicked are always trying to catch folks, catch the righteous and violating. Psalm 37:32 says, "The wicked watches the righteous and seeks to slay him." So the wicked are watching us who are trying to do God's will, trying to live a life that we should be living, and they're trying to catch us in doing things. One verse that I really like is Psalms 35:21. Said, "They opened their mouth wide against me and said, aha, aha, our eyes have seen it." That's a good verse. I think we can relate to that. I think we've probably heard that many times. Aha, I caught you. I got you. So that's really, David really wrote a good verse there. About how people are and how things are around us. But we need to trust God, even in the most desperate times. There's times in our lives that I know is hard. Time that we don't know if there's anybody that really cares what's going on in our life. But we know that God cares, and we need to trust Him even more, even in those desperate times. David also says in Psalm 91:2, says, "I will say of Jehovah, He is my refuge, my fortress, my God whom I trust." And that's the way we should live. That's the way we should be every day. God is my refuge. He's my fortress, and He's my God whom I trust. We need to trust God every day in our lives and know that He is with us, and He's willing to do everything that He can to help us in our life. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." There's a lot of things in this world I don't understand. There's a lot of things that I don't know about. And most of us in here have been in the church many years, and we understand. I mean, we know that we don't know everything. In 60 years as being a Christian, I still don't know everything, and I don't know. I don't have all the answers, and I learn a lot from other people. That maybe hasn't been around as long as I have. We learn a lot of things in our life, and we just need to trust God and trust with all our heart, and not try to just lean upon what we think we know. Sometimes what we think we know is not really what we should know, I guess. We try to work out in our mind things that are not what really we need to be working out. We need to trust God and trust that God has our best interests at heart. Right. Right. Yeah, we don't understand what's going on sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in life, like, why is that happening? Why, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people that, says, why is God doing this to me? Well, God's not doing it to you. God knows what he's doing, and we just need to trust God that he does know, and he's there to help us in our ways. He says, in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Acknowledge God. We believe in God. We know God that is there. We know God is directing us. So Daniel has been put in the lion's den. The king, it says, looking at verses 16, chapter 6, 18 through 23, it says that the king fasted all night. Again, the king kind of realized now what's going on. He knows that he was tricked into condemning Daniel to the lion's den, but he stayed up all night. He couldn't, it bothered him. It really bothered him. And he said he didn't listen to any kind of music. He didn't sleep. He had a sleepless night, and he couldn't, just couldn't get it out of his mind, I guess. We know how that is. Something comes up and things happen, and we lay awake at night and thinking, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to handle this? How are we going to fix this? And just sleep just doesn't come. And that's kind of the way it was with him. But as soon as...
It actually says he fasted. Fasting has a worship connotation of meditating.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we've had times in here when we've asked that, I remember several years ago, I think when the school was here, we had a time of fasting and prayer. Remember that? And we asked the congregation and those concerned with the school, spend time fasting and praying for the school but we don't, the Bible doesn't really tell us that we have to, or the New Testament doesn't really tell us that we have to fast, and it's up to the individual. But really the connotation there to me is, you spend your time and put your energy and your mind into praying and to asking God for the things that are needed, and not, worrying about eating and doing other things. Just spend your time talking to God and trying to and asking him to help. So the king wakes up the next morning. He goes, well, he didn't wake up because he didn't sleep, but he gets up the next morning, and first thing he does is goes to the den, right? You remember the story. He goes and inspects the lion's den. He rushes to the lion's den. He cries out with a lamenting voice. He's expressing his regret. He's expressing his grief and his disapproval over something that he really considered was unreasonable and unfair. But, in the back of his mind, he knew Daniel enough and knew Daniel believed in God enough that in the back of his mind, he's like, Daniel's God would be able to save him. Daniel's God probably saved him. The layman is really a person. He was really mourning, because he wasn't sure what he was going to find. His mind was thinking that everything would be all right, but he wasn't sure. He liked Daniel. Daniel was a close associate, or somebody that he respected and had a lot of respect for, and he really mourned the fact that possibly Daniel would be dead when he got there. And he asked if Daniel's God had delivered him from the lion's den. And that says something about Darius there. He knew that Daniel's God, is the way it would be put, was able to save him. And then Daniel cries out, he says, "O king, live forever." You know, that was kind of music to his ears. Oh, he's alive. You know, Daniel said God had sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lion, and Darius pronounces his innocence, or he pronounces his innocence and tells the king that he has done nothing to hurt him. You know, he said, "I'm an innocent man. I didn't do anything to hurt you. I did what God wants me to do. I prayed, but I didn't do anything to hurt you." So Daniel is brought out of the lion's den. And when he brought him out, he wasn't hurt in any way. There was no mark on him. There was nothing nothing there that would show that he'd even been in there. That lions didn't. They didn't even. They didn't even. The movie we saw, we see about that. It just shows where the lions just fell and went to sleep. They're just like ready to attack, and all of a sudden they just go to sleep. So they sleep. And that could be. I don't know. But the king now is angry. He's mad at what he has done, and what the other people had done, the other leaders had done. He's mad about it. They not only plotted against Daniel, but now they've made a mockery out of him. They've tricked him into signing a law that says you must worship the king and not any other god, and he sees now that they made a mockery out of that. So he took them and cast them in the lion's den along with their families. Not just them. He destroyed the whole families. And it really demonstrates the king's wrath against those who manipulated the system for their own purposes. And what was their own purposes? They didn't like Daniel. They didn't think Daniel should have the position that he got. Maybe they thought they should have that position. We don't know for sure, but they were just basically what? They were jealous of him. They were jealous of Daniel and what he was able to accomplish. So they manipulated the system for their own purposes. So from that day, the king's proclamation is he decreed that men tremble before Daniel's God. This is the living God. This is the God whose kingdom shall never be destroyed. Now, again, you go back and read the Old Testament. When you look at stories, not only like Daniel, but when you look at the Old Testament, read the story of the Old Testament, how the Jews went into captivity, when they went into slavery under Egypt, and we see the story just being laid out all the way through. We see the story being told, and when you get to the New Testament, you can really more understand what's going on when we read it. God will deliver, and God rescues. God works many signs and wonders. He stopped the lions from eating Daniel. And again, there's another story, of course, obviously in Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They were thrown into the fiery furnace, and because they refused to obey something that they knew was wrong, and they came out. There's several instances where God has saved people from destruction because they believed what God said and wanted to do what God said. So this is a sign. This is one of the signs that God can work wonders in our lives. There are many ways today that we have to. There are laws we have to obey. Laws are put in place for purpose. This law that was put in place here was not a law really that the king, I think on his own, if he had thought about it, he would not have put it in place. He was tricked into putting it in place. But there are laws today that we have to obey. If today we break the law, we're going to have the wrath of the government on us. In Romans 13:3-4 said, "For rulers are not a terror of good conduct, but to bad." People who are doing the right thing, people who are not trying to break the law, people who are trying to live right and trying to live to be lawful citizens, they don't have to worry about the law. They don't have to worry about, they're not a terror to them. We teach our kids sometimes when they're younger, they can have a fear of the policeman or something like that. We teach our kids, don't be afraid of him. If you need help, you see a policeman, go talk to him and tell him you need help. If you get lost in the mall or on the street or whatever, you see a policeman, go tell him and he'll help you. And that's something that they're not a terror for good, but for bad. It says, Paul says, would you have no fear of one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. If you do not want to have fear of those in authority, then do what's right. We need to do what the law says and follow the law. It says he said he is a God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the evildoer. So we need to obey the laws that are given to us, and the laws that sometimes, of course, there's laws and things, rules that will go against what the Bible teaches, and we have to watch for things like that. But the laws that are given us, they're by God. They were put there by God and the people that are in charge. So if we do wrong, we got to be afraid, and we got to bear the consequences for what we do. But there's no reason, and one of the things you see in the Old Testament is people who believe in God, people who do not believe in God. And as we read, if we study the Old Testament and into the New Testament, there's no reason not to believe in God. Look at everything around us. I mean, look at all the things that we have. I mean, how else other than God can we have all these things? The things just don't pop up. I don't care what scientists tell you or what people out there tell you. All the things that's happened in this world could not have happened just by chance. It could have just popped up without some reason. It has to be something behind it, and that person has got to be God. In Romans 1:20 says, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." There's no excuse not to believe in God. Everything that we see all the way back to creation, we can see that it's been made by God. There's no other explanation for it. I saw a thing one time that said, if you throw if you believe that the world is by chance, take a large city's phone book, rip it up and throw it in the air and see, and when it comes back down, see if it comes back together, in the perfect order. It's not going to do it, but God can make everything perfect. He can make everything come together in perfect order. So I'm glad that Alan is talking, is teaching some things from the Old Testament, and I'm glad that he's showing us some things and giving us examples of things that happened then and people that lived back then. So we can really learn, and we can learn from what they say. Any questions or comments this morning? Anybody want to talk about Daniel or somebody else? Go ahead.
I read a promise just yesterday about God, and it basically said those who are his, he will keep from the wicked. He won't let the wicked get us if we're his.
Yeah, I mean, trusting God, if we really trust in God and really believe that God will do what he says and God will take care of us, then he'll take care of us. I mean, we're not going to want to do the things that the world does. We're not going to want to do we're not going to want to go out and sin and do bad things if we trust in God.
Trusting in things of God, spiritually, more than anything, because we're not to trust in God. The physical rewards, like God gave me $1 million, or, I'm just trying to think of those things that a lot of people try to put their trust in God to give them in this world, when our reward is heaven.
Right.
And that's where our trust is, that he will take care of us, and that our end result, we will be with him in heaven for eternity.
Yeah.
And that he will be with us as we travel through this life. He gives us the strength to endure it.
Yeah. Everything that goes on in this world, we talked on Wednesday night, we studied in Romans on Wednesday night, and we've talked a lot about, things that's going on in the world today that we don't agree with. The different things, with the LGBTQ, whatever the ABCs are there, and all this other stuff. We don't agree with all that. We don't agree that in the transgender, and that's completely against God's law. But and you hear people say, well, God's going to have to come back pretty soon, because if it's the way things are going, I mean, he's just going to have to come back and or he's going to have to do something. And of course, again, if we look at history, I mean, all this stuff's been going on since the beginning of time. I mean, we look at it now, it's terrible now. Well, the Romans, the Jews under the Romans, they thought that was terrible. It's all terrible. But as Christians, I know you have to be concerned about things like that, the way the world's going. I mean, you have to think about it. But as Christians, our minds should not be on what's going on around us every day. I mean, our mind should be pointed toward God. That's our purpose here, to live a life in a way that God would have us to live, and to, we used to, people used to say, our responsibility is to live our lives as a Christian so that we can live to go to heaven to be with God and take as many as we can with us. That's our purpose. And, our home is not here. This is not our home. This is just a journey we're going through. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. But we got to live in a way that when we leave this world, that we'll be in a real home with God for an eternity.
He didn't preach
Right.
to the king that he needed to worship God. He worshiped God, and he lived his life every day like a meditation, every day bowing and praying to God. The diet that he followed when he first went under it, because he tried to do things God's way, he shone a light. So at this point in time, this king who has many idols that worship, he called God the living God.
Right.
When he talked about him,
Right.
he called him the living God.
Right. That's the one true God. Okay. Any other comments?
She took my comment.
Do it.
It was just significant how these rulers, we just got through with Joseph and the Pharaoh, they just believe in God that this guy is serving.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to what? Compared to ours?
Yeah.
The temple thing we got going on. So,
Yeah.
and it's significant that, like they said, he just watched Daniel. I don't know if Daniel was having conversations with him all the time about the living God, but if you
Okay, that was the first bell. We'll go ahead and close out the class. Alan should be back next week, Lord willing, and you won't have to listen to me, so, but Blaine, like I said, I think Blaine's gonna preach this morning, so, we'll, look forward to that. Thank everybody.